Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Imagine this. You're standing in the middle of a beautiful, busy street in a foreign country. You reach down to grab your bag, and it's gone. Your money, your phone, your passport, everything. And to make it worse, you barely speak the local language. What do? It is the ultimate travel nightmare. But today, we're using this exact high-stakes scenario to master the English you need when things go completely wrong. By following this 10-chapter story, you're going to learn essential phrases for emergencies, dealing with authorities, and asking for help when every second counts. Let's dive into Chapter 1, The Cold Chill of Empty Space.
The aromatic scent of roasted coffee and fresh pastries filled the air at the crowded Plaza Cafe. Elena sat at a small wooden table, absorbing the vibrant atmosphere of Rio de Janeiro. She smiled, watching street performers dance to a lively, somber rhythm. It was the perfect afternoon, or so she thought. When the waiter brought her bill, Elena instinctively reached down beside her chair to grab her leather backpack. Her hand swiped through nothing but empty air. A cold chill shot straight down her spine. She looked down. The space next to her legs was completely vacant. Her breath caught in her throat as a wave of pure panic washed over her. "No, no, no," she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. She dropped to her knees, frantically searching beneath the table and checking the surrounding chairs. Out of thin air, her bag had vanished. Inside it was everything: her wallet, her credit cards, her phone, and most importantly, her passport. Without her identification, she was completely stranded. Elena stood up, her face turning pale. She looked around the bustling plaza, but every face was just a blur of strangers. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She was entirely alone in a foreign country. She couldn't speak the language, and she had absolutely nothing.
Elena stood frozen by her table, her eyes darting desperately from person to person. She needed help immediately, but her throat felt completely dry. The waiter who had brought her bill noticed her pale face and walked over with a look of concern. "Está todo bien?" he asked, his voice filled with unfamiliar Portuguese syllables. Elena shook her head quickly, trying to swallow the lump of anxiety in her throat. "My bag," she stammered, pointing frantically to the empty space on the floor. "Someone took my bag." The waiter blinked, looking down at the floor and then back up at her with a puzzled expression. He didn't understand a single word she was saying. Elena tried to mimic holding a backpack over her shoulders, her hands trembling as she gestured. "Backpack! Money! Passport!" she cried out, her voice rising in pitch as tears threatened to spill over. A few customers at nearby tables turned around to look at her, whispering amongst themselves. The waiter shrugged his shoulders helplessly and called out to a manager standing near the entrance. Elena felt a crushing wave of isolation as the two men began discussing the situation in rapid native speech. She could not follow their words at all. They sounded like a blur of fast, running water. "Please," she interrupted, touching her own chest with both hands to catch their attention. "Is there anyone here who speaks English?" The manager paused, looked at her stressed expression, and slowly shook his head from side to side. "No English here," the manager replied in a thick accent, pointing a finger out toward the main street. "Maybe hotel?" Elena walked out of the cafe, her mind spinning as she tried to force herself to think clearly. She took a deep, shaky breath and realized she had to think backward to find out exactly where things went wrong. "Think, Elena, think," she muttered to herself, pressing her hands against her temples. She closed her eyes and tried to visualize her entire afternoon, step by step. Before coming to the Plaza Cafe, she had spent an hour exploring a crowded artisan market nearby. She vividly remembered opening her backpack there to pay for a small souvenir. "The souvenir shop," she whispered, a tiny spark of hope lighting up inside her chest. "I had it there." She turned around and began walking quickly back toward the market street, her eyes scanning the pavement. Maybe the strap had slipped off her shoulder, or maybe she had simply set it down on a counter and walked away. She arrived at the colorful market stall, but the elderly vendor just shook his head when she tried to gesture about a bag. Elena's hope began to fade, but she refused to give up just yet. Before the market, she had taken a local taxi from her hotel to get to this part of the city. She remembered sitting in the back seat, scrolling through her phone and placing her backpack on the seat beside her. Did she leave it in the taxi when she paid the driver and stepped out into the heat? The realization made her stomach turn, because finding that specific taxi in a city of millions was practically impossible. She stood on the busy curb, watching dozens of identical yellow cars speed past her. She was completely stuck, unable to move forward and unable to go back. Realizing the bag was gone for good, Elena knew she had to take formal action immediately. She asked a bilingual passerby for directions and walked 6 long blocks to the local police precinct. The station was chaotic, filled with noisy typing, ringing phones, and people speaking rapid Portuguese. She approached the front desk, her hands gripping the high wooden counter tightly to stop them from shaking. "I need to report a theft," she told the officer on duty, using the clearest, slowest English she could muster. The officer sighed, pulled out a thick stack of official paperwork, and gestured for her to sit down at a side desk. "No English well," the officer warned, tapping a printed translation sheet on the desk. "Describe object." Elena nodded, realizing she had to be incredibly precise despite her growing exhaustion and anxiety. "It is a leather backpack, brown color, small size," she explained, drawing the shape in the air with her hands. She listed the critical contents one by one: her passport, her wallet, 3 credit cards, and her mobile phone. The officer slowly typed the details into an old computer system, occasionally stopping to ask her to spell a word. "Any suspect?" the officer asked, looking up over the rim of his reading glasses. "Did you see anyone?" Elena shook her head sadly, explaining that she had been completely distracted by the street musicians at the plaza. After an agonizing 45 minutes, the officer printed out an official document and stamped it with a heavy blue seal. "This is your police report copy," he said, handing her the crisp piece of paper. "Keep it very safe." Elena held the paper tight, knowing this official record was now her only legal identity in a foreign land. Elena walked out of the police station with nothing but a single sheet of paper in her hand. The afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the unfamiliar streets. She felt completely exposed without her phone, which usually served as her map, her wallet, and her connection to safety. She walked until she found a small internet cafe, its glowing sign offering a desperate digital lifeline. She walked up to the counter and held up her police report, pointing at a computer screen. "I have no money, but I need to log into my bank," she pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. The young clerk looked at the official police stamp, took pity on her, and nodded toward an open desk in the corner. Elena quickly sat down, her fingers trembling as she typed in her bank's website URL.
She entered her username and password from memory, holding her breath as the loading screen spun around. Suddenly, a massive red warning banner flashed across the screen. Unusual login attempt detected. Because she was accessing her account from a new device in a foreign country, the bank's security system blocked her. "We have sent a verification code to your registered mobile number," the screen read. Elena stared at the message in total despair, remembering that her phone was sitting in her stolen bag. She could not receive the code, which meant she was completely locked out of her own money. She leaned forward, burying her face in her hands as the harsh reality of her situation settled over her. She was thousands of miles away from home, completely penniless and totally cut off from the digital world.
Elena left the internet cafe and walked toward the consular district, relying on the memory of a map the clerk had drawn for her. The towering gates of her country's embassy represented her final hope of returning home safely. She approached the security booth at the entrance and pressed the intercom button with a shaking finger. "Please help me," she said clearly into the small speaker. "My bag was stolen, and I have lost my passport." The metal gate buzzed loudly, clicking open to allow her inside the secure courtyard. She entered a quiet waiting room and was soon called up to a window by a sympathetic consular officer named Mark. "Take a deep breath," Mark said kindly, sliding a clipboard across the counter toward her. "We deal with this every day." He explained that they could issue an emergency passport, a temporary document used strictly for returning home. "However," Mark added, pointing to a list on the clipboard, "we still require a few things from you first." Elena looked down at the requirements. She needed a copy of her police report, proof of citizenship, and 2 physical passport photos. She handed over the police report, but her heart sank when she looked at the photo requirement. "I don't have any money for photos," she explained softly, gesturing to her empty pockets. Mark explained that the official embassy policy required physical prints for the security document, meaning she had to find a way to get them. He gave her the address of a small photography shop around a corner and told her to return as soon as she could. Elena walked back out into the humid air, wondering how on earth she was going to pay a photographer with absolutely nothing.
Elena sat on a concrete bench outside the photo shop, her head resting heavily in her hands. The photographer had politely turned her away when she explained she could not pay for the pictures. Exhaustion and hunger were finally catching up to her, making her eyes sting with tears of frustration. "Excuse me, are you all right?" a voice asked in clear English with a warm, familiar accent. Elena looked up to see a woman in her late 20s holding a grocery bag and looking down at her with genuine concern. I lost everything," Elena confessed, her voice cracking as she pointed toward the embassy gates down the street. "My bag was stolen." The woman, whose name was Sarah, immediately sat down beside Elena on the bench and listened to Elena's story. Sarah was an expatriate living in the city, and she understood exactly how terrifying it was to be stuck without an identity. "Don't worry," Sarah said firmly, standing up and pulling a small wallet from her purse. "We are going to fix this." Sarah walked into the photo shop with Elena, spoke to the photographer in fluent Portuguese, and paid for the passport photos. While they waited for the prints to dry, Sarah insisted on buying Elena a warm cheese bread and a fresh juice from a nearby cart. Elena felt an immense wave of relief wash over her as she took her first bite of food in hours. Sarah also handed her a small cash loan and wrote her phone number on a scrap of paper. "Take this to tide you over until you get to the airport," Sarah said, giving Elena a reassuring hug. "You are not alone." Elena thanked her repeatedly, her heart full of gratitude for the incredible kindness of a complete stranger.
With her photos secured and her application submitted, Elena faced a new challenge: waiting for the embassy to process her paperwork. Mark had informed her that the emergency document would take at least 48 hours to print and authorize. 2 full days felt like an eternity when she had no phone to scroll through, no book to read, and limited cash. She walked back to her hotel and explained the situation to the front desk clerk, who kindly allowed her to stay in her room. Without digital distractions, Elena spent the next 2 days experiencing the foreign city in a completely different way. She sat in a quiet public park, watching elderly locals play chess and listening to the unfamiliar birds singing in the trees. She found herself paying attention to the small details of the architecture and the warmth of the afternoon sun on her skin. Normally, she would have been constantly taking photos or checking maps on her screen, distracted from the present moment. Now, she was forced to simply observe, slow down, and let the anxious thoughts pass through her mind without taking over. Every time panic started to creep back into her chest, she reminded herself of Sarah's kindness and the police report in her pocket. She realized that while she had lost her material belongings, she had not lost her resilience or her capability. She learned to embrace the quiet hours, treating the forced waiting period as a lesson in patience and mental strength. When the second evening finally arrived, she fell asleep feeling calmer than she had since the backpack first vanished. On the third morning, Elena returned to the embassy and finally held the emergency passport in her hands. It was a simple, thin booklet, but to her, it looked like the most beautiful thing in the world. "This will get you past customs and on to your flight home," Mark said, giving her a supportive smile. "Good luck." With her new document packed safely inside her jacket pocket, Elena rushed directly to the international airport. She approached the airline check-in counter, her nerves returning, as she presented the temporary passport to the agent. The agent looked at the emergency booklet, typed quickly into the computer, and called over a supervisor to verify the details. Elena held her breath, waiting through a tense silence until the supervisor finally nodded and approved the booking. "Here is your new boarding pass, ma'am," the agent said, sliding the crisp piece of paper across the counter. Because of her emergency documentation, Elena was directed to a special security screening area for extra identity checks. The customs officials examined her police report, asked her several precise questions about her trip, and scanned her fingerprints. She answered every question calmly and clearly, refusing to let the intense pressure make her look suspicious. After 20 minutes of thorough inspection, the lead official smiled, stamped her paperwork, and gestured toward the gates. Elena walked down the terminal toward her departure gate, her heart lifting with every step she took. She watched her massive commercial airplane pull up to the terminal window, ready to carry her back to safety. Elena sank into her assigned window seat as the airplane's massive engines roared to life, preparing for takeoff. She looked out at the city lights of Rio de Janeiro shrinking below her as the plane climbed high into the night sky. A profound sense of relief washed over her, and for the first time in days, she let out a long, unburdened sigh. She reached down to touch the secure pocket of her jacket, confirming that her emergency passport was still safely inside. Losing everything in a foreign land had been an absolute nightmare, but it had also taught her invaluable lessons about survival. She realized she was far more resilient than she had ever imagined, capable of navigating a complex crisis entirely on her own. She would never forget the cold panic of the cafe, but she would also never forget Sarah's incredible generosity outside the photo shop. The experience had completely changed her perspective on international travel and how she prepared for the unexpected. When she finally arrived back home, she immediately implemented new security habits to protect herself on future adventures.
She uploaded digital copies of her vital documents to a secure cloud backup that she could access from any device worldwide. She purchased a slim money belt to wear hidden beneath her clothing, keeping her cash and identification separate from her main bag. Most importantly, she vowed to always look out for other travelers who might find themselves stranded or in distress. Elena closed her eyes and smiled, knowing that while she had lost a backpack, she had gained an unbreakable sense of confidence.
Elena made it home safe, and she's a much wiser traveler because of it. But now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever lost something valuable while traveling abroad? Or what is the #1 safety tip you use to protect your passport when you travel? Let me know in the comments below. I read and reply to every single one. You can find all the vocabulary of the story down below in the description box. If you want to keep improving your English listening skills and mastering real-life vocabulary through stories just like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thank you so much for watching. Keep practicing and take care, and I will see you in our next story. Goodbye.